The evening sun was sinking behind the tall buildings of Bangkok, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Outside Sirivathana General Hospital, a boy about 9 years old stood quietly near the emergency gate. His face was pale, his lips dry, and his breathing uneven. He clutched his stomach tightly with one hand while the other held a small plastic bag filled with cheap medicine packets. He had been standing there for nearly an hour. His name was Niran, and he came from the slums across the Chao Phraya River, a place the city forgot. His mother worked at a food stall, and his father. No one seemed to know. Inside the emergency room, the nurses were finishing their shift. The smell of antiseptic hung in the air, mixed with the faint sound of beeping machines and hurried footsteps. A security guard spotted Niran through the glass door. "Hey! What are you doing here, kid?" he shouted in Thai. "I need to see a doctor, sir," Niran said weakly. "I can't breathe properly." The guard frowned. The boy's clothes were torn, and his sandals were mismatched. "Do you have money?" Niran shook his head. "My mother said they will help even if I don't." The guard sighed. He had seen too many like him: street kids, beggars, people who came hoping for free care in a private hospital. "Go to the public clinic," he said firmly. "This hospital is not for charity." Niran didn't move. His small chest rose and fell with difficulty. "Please, just one doctor. I can pay later." Just then, a nurse named Molly passed by and noticed the boy. She paused, her heart softening. "What's going on?" she asked the guard. "He says he can't breathe," the guard replied. "Probably another one trying to get free treatment." Molly crouched to meet the boy's eyes. "What's your name, child?" "Niran." "Where's your mother?" "She's working. I came alone." Molly felt a pang of pity. She wanted to help but remembered the hospital's strict policy: no admission without a payment guarantee. She looked around and lowered her voice. "I'm sorry, Niran. You need to go to King Chulalongkorn Hospital. They take emergency cases for free." "But that's far," he whispered. "I can't walk that long." Before she could respond, the chief receptionist, a woman named Pimchanok, came out. "What's happening here?" she asked sharply. "This boy needs help," Molly said quietly. Pimchanok looked at Niran from head to toe. "He's not our responsibility. We can't waste time. If his parents can't afford it, he should go to a government hospital." The boy's eyes welled up with tears. "Please, miss. I just need to breathe." "Enough," Pimchanok snapped. "Security, escort him out before the director sees him here." The guard hesitated, but one cold glance from Pimchanok made him obey. He gently pushed the boy away from the door. As Niran stumbled backward, a small crowd began to gather. A few patients in the waiting area watched silently, whispering among themselves. No one stepped forward. He reached the hospital gate and sat down on the pavement, clutching his chest. His breath was getting shorter. His eyes blurred with tears and exhaustion. Minutes passed. Then, a black luxury car, a Mercedes S-Class, rolled up to the entrance. The hospital staff straightened immediately. The director, Dr. Vic Hai, rushed out with several nurses to greet the arriving guest. The car door opened, and out stepped Mr. Arthit Fongsawat, a well-known businessman, owner of a vast real estate empire and one of the hospital's major donors. He was tall, dressed in a grey suit, his face calm and authoritative. He was here for a routine checkup. As he walked toward the lobby, his eyes fell on a small figure sitting on the ground outside the gate. Something about the boy caught his attention: the posture, the eyes, the face. He stopped. "Who is that child?" he asked the security guard. The guard hesitated. "Just a poor boy, sir. He came begging for treatment but didn't have money." Arthit frowned. "And you turned him away?" "Yes, sir. Policy." Mr. Arthit looked at the boy again. His heart skipped a beat. He walked closer, crouching beside the child. The boy looked up weakly. "It hurts, uncle," he whispered. Art Hit froze. His breath caught in his throat. He knew that voice. Those eyes. That face. Niren, he said softly, almost trembling. The guard looked confused. You know him, sir? Art Hit didn't answer. He lifted the boy into his arms without another word and marched straight into the hospital. The staff hurried after him, their faces pale. Prepare the emergency room, now. Art Hit commanded. His voice echoed across the corridor. Dr. Vikhai ran behind him. Yes, sir. Right away. The same nurse, Molly, who had seen Niren earlier, froze in shock. Within seconds, the boy who was pushed out for being poor was now being wheeled into the emergency ward, with the hospital's owner walking beside him. And in that moment, everyone's heart sank. Because the boy they had refused to help was the only son of the man who owned half the hospital. The automatic doors slid open as Mr. Art Hit carried Niren inside the emergency ward. Every staff member froze. The receptionist, Pimchinok, turned pale as she realized what was happening. Only moments ago, she had ordered the same boy to be thrown out. Call the pediatric team now, shouted Dr. Vikhai, the hospital director. His voice cracked as he hurried beside Mr. Art Hit. Get oxygen ready. Prepare a stretcher. Molly, the nurse who had felt pity for the boy earlier, rushed forward and guided them to the emergency bed. She attached the oxygen mask to Niren's face and checked his pulse with trembling hands. His heartbeat is weak, she said softly. He needs 4 fluids. Art Hit stood beside the bed, his face tight with worry. Do whatever it takes. Save him. Yes, sir. Molly replied, signaling to the other nurses. The room filled with motion. Machines beeped, nurses moved swiftly, and doctors shouted orders. But in the middle of all the chaos, there was silence inside Art Hit's heart. He looked at his son, frail, pale, and struggling for breath, and guilt struck him like lightning. He hadn't seen Niren in nearly 3 years. After separating from his wife, he had buried himself in work, pretending that distance could make the pain disappear. He still sent money every month, but he hadn't visited, hadn't called. Now his son was fighting for his life, right in front of him. Outside the emergency ward, the staff whispered nervously. Is that his son? A nurse murmured. Yes. The one from his first marriage, another replied quietly. No one knew the boy lived in the slums. Pimchinok sat frozen at her desk, replaying the last 10 minutes in her head. Her hands shook. She could hear the faint echo of her own voice. He's not our responsibility. She had no idea the poor boy was the heir to the man who funded the hospital's expansion. Dr. Vikhai came out after a few minutes, wiping his forehead. He approached Pimchinok with a cold, controlled anger. What have you done? He hissed. I didn't know, sir, she stammered. He looked like a street boy. That's not the point. Dr. Vikhai snapped. You refused an emergency case. Do you realize what will happen if Mr. Art Hit reports this? Pimchinok's eyes filled with tears. Please, sir. Don't tell him. I was following hospital policy. Policy doesn't excuse cruelty, he barked. He turned and saw Molly standing silently nearby. You, he said, his tone softening. You tried to help him, didn't you? Molly nodded. I wanted to, but she glanced at Pimchinok, told me to send him away. Dr. Vikhai sighed heavily. Stay close to the boy. Keep me updated on everything. I'll handle Mr. Art Hit. Inside the room, Niren's condition began to stabilize. His breathing grew steady, and his pulse strengthened. Art Hit sat by his side, holding his small hand. For the first time in years, tears welled up in his eyes. Why didn't anyone help you sooner? He whispered. What kind of world turns away a child? Niren's eyelids fluttered open. He looked around weakly, then focused on his father's face. Dad, he whispered, barely audible. Art Hit leaned closer. I'm here, son. You're safe now. I I tried to find you, the boy said softly. Mom said you were busy. Arthit's throat tightened. I'm sorry, Niren. I should have been there. Molly, standing quietly by the monitor, felt tears prick her own eyes. She couldn't look at them without guilt. After a while, Dr. Vikhai entered, his expression cautious. Sir, the boy is stable. We'll keep him under observation tonight. Arthit nodded. Good. I'll stay with him. Of course, the director said. Sir, about the earlier misunderstanding. Arthit looked at him coldly. You mean when your staff refused to treat my son? Dr. Vishai's heart pounded. Yes, sir. It was a terrible mistake. Please understand, the staff didn't know who he was. Arthit's voice turned sharp. They didn't have to know. No child should be turned away like that. Not in my hospital. The director swallowed hard. You're absolutely right, sir. I'll take full responsibility. The staff involved will be disciplined immediately. Arthit's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. Don't do it for me. Do it because next time, the child might not be mine. And if your hospital treats the poor like trash, then it's not worth the name it carries. Dr. Vikhai bowed slightly, humiliated. Understood, sir. As the director left, Molly approached Arthit carefully. Sir, I'm sorry for what happened earlier. I wanted to help, but... Arthit turned to her. You did the right thing, nurse. Thank you for trying. She nodded quietly and left the room, feeling both relieved and ashamed. That night, Bangkok's streets shimmered under the rain. In the hospital room, Arthit sat beside his sleeping son, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about business, money, or reputation. He was thinking about love, and the cost of forgetting it. In another part of the hospital, the director and staff sat in silence during an emergency meeting. Pimchinok stared at her hands, unable to lift her eyes. The news had already spread among the workers, and everyone knew this incident could destroy their jobs. And somewhere deep inside, guilt began to replace fear. Because what they did to that boy was something no policy could justify. The next morning, soft sunlight filtered through the hospital blinds. The city outside was already alive, the sound of traffic, vendors shouting, and monks collecting alms. Inside room 407, the atmosphere was calm but heavy. Niren was still asleep, his small chest rising and falling rhythmically. His father, Mr. Arthit, sat beside him, his eyes tired but thoughtful. He had been awake most of the night, watching his son breathe, replaying every decision he'd made over the past few years. A knock came at the door. It was Dr. Vikhai, holding a clipboard. Behind him stood Molly, the nurse. Good morning, sir, said the doctor softly. The boy's condition has improved significantly. He just needs rest and proper food. The oxygen helped stabilize him. Arthit nodded, his tone low. Thank you. You've done well. Dr. Vikhai hesitated. Sir, may I ask, how long had he been sick? I'm not sure, Arthit admitted. I didn't know he was living in such conditions. His mother never told me. Molly glanced at him gently. Sometimes parents hide their struggles, sir. Maybe she didn't want to worry you. Arthit sighed. She shouldn't have had to hide anything. Later that morning, a woman arrived at the hospital. Sudha, Niren's mother. Her face was lined with worry, her hands trembling as she ran through the hallways asking for her son. A nurse pointed her to room 407. When she entered, she stopped at the door. Her eyes widened. There, sitting by her son's bed, was Arthit, the man she had once loved but left behind. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither spoke. How did you find him? She asked softly. I didn't, Arthit replied. He found me. Outside my own hospital. Collapsing. Sudha's eyes filled with tears. She covered her mouth and sank into the chair beside the bed. I didn't know where else to take him. The government clinic was closed, and the private ones wanted money we didn't have. I thought maybe someone here would show mercy. Arthit's voice tightened. Mercy shouldn't depend on money. She nodded. You're right. But the world doesn't always listen to right and wrong. There was silence for a moment, broken only by the soft beep of the monitor. Why didn't you tell me, Suda? Arthit asked quietly. That you were struggling. That Nairan was sick. Suda looked down. Because you moved on. Because every time I called, your secretary said you were in meetings or abroad. I didn't want to sound like a beggar asking for help. Arthit felt a deep ache in his chest. You were never a beggar. She smiled faintly, without warmth. Maybe not then. But yesterday, I almost became one. Outside the room, the hospital was buzzing. The staff had all heard about the incident. Some whispered that the receptionist, Pimchanok, might lose her job. Others said the director had already written a formal apology letter to Mr. Arthit. Molly tried to stay focused on her rounds, but she couldn't shake the image of the boy sitting outside the gate. She approached the director's office later that day. Sir, if I may, she said cautiously, shouldn't we review our emergency policy? It's not just about this case. What if something like this happens again? Dr. Vikhai rubbed his temples. You're right, Nurse Molly. I've already spoken to the board. We're revising the admission rules. From now on, every emergency case must be treated immediately. Payment can come later. Molly nodded in relief. That's good news, sir. The doctor sighed. Yes. But one boy almost paid with his life before we learned that lesson. Back in room 407, Nairan finally woke up. His mother smiled through her tears and touched his forehead. How do you feel, my love? Better, he whispered. His eyes moved to his father. Dad's here. Arthit smiled weakly. I'm not leaving again, I promise. The boy blinked sleepily. You mean it? I do, said Arthit. From now on, you'll live with me. You'll go to a good school, get proper food, and never have to wait outside a hospital again. Suda hesitated. Arthit, that's not necessary. It is, he interrupted gently. I've been absent long enough. Suda looked at him, uncertain. There was a time when she had known this man's every thought, when he had been kind, humble, and full of dreams. But years of wealth and power had built walls around him. Now, seeing him like this, broken, remorseful, she wasn't sure which version was real anymore. Do what's best for him, she said quietly. Just don't hurt him again. Arthit nodded. I won't. That night, when the nurses finished their shifts, Molly walked past the hospital gate. She stopped for a moment, staring at the spot where Nairan had collapsed the day before. It looked like any other patch of pavement, yet for her, it had become a reminder. Not just of a mistake, but of a truth. A soft rain fell over Bangkok, blurring the city lights into golden streaks. Inside the quiet house, Nairan's laughter echoed from the living room, where he built a tower of wooden blocks with Suda. The sound filled every corner of Arthit's heart, a sound he once thought he'd never hear. 4 months, peace had truly returned. The threats were gone, the court had ruled in Arthit's favor, and Ananda's company had collapsed under the weight of its own corruption. But what mattered most wasn't victory. It was the life they had built from the ruins. That evening, Arthit sat with Nairan on the balcony. The boy was tracing raindrops racing down the glass. Papa, he said suddenly, when I grow up, can I be like you? Arthit smiled softly. You can be anything you want, Nairan. But if you want to be like me, then promise me something. Nairan looked up, curious. Promise me, Arthit said, that when you have power, you'll use it to help, not to hurt. Even when it's hard. Nairan nodded seriously. I promise. Arthit ruffled his hair, hiding the emotion in his eyes. Good boy. Later that night, Suda found Arthit standing by the window, watching the rain. You're quiet, she said gently. Are you thinking about the past again? He shook his head. No. I'm thinking about what comes next. She smiled. For a man who owns half of Bangkok, that's a big question. Art chuckled softly. I used to think success meant building bigger things. Now I think it just means keeping the people you love safe. She stepped closer, resting her head on his shoulder. You've already done that. He turned slightly to face her. I wasn't there when you needed me most. I can't change that. But I can promise you one thing. I'll never disappear again. Her eyes glistened. That's all I ever wanted to hear. Months later, the hospital that once refused to treat Niren held a charity event, funded anonymously by Art. He didn't attend, but the new head doctor gave a speech. This hospital once failed a child because of pride and prejudice. Today, that child's story reminds us what medicine truly means: compassion. When the staff saw the plaque at the entrance, engraved with the words, "For every child, no matter their name," some of them understood who had funded it. But no one spoke his name aloud. It wasn't about reputation anymore. It was about redemption. At home, Suda watched Niren run around the garden, his laughter mixing with the warm Thai breeze. Art sat nearby, reading quietly, until the boy ran up and tugged at his sleeve. "Papa, come play." Art smiled, closing the book. "All right. But if I win again, you owe me a mango smoothie." Niren laughed. "No fair. You always win." "Then it's time you learn how to beat me," Art said, chasing him across the grass as Suda laughed from the porch. For that moment, there were no memories of hospitals, threats, or fear. Only the sound of a family that had survived. That night, after Niren had fallen asleep, Suda and Art stood by his door, watching him. "He looks peaceful," she whispered. "He is," Art replied. "And so am I." Suda looked at him, smiling softly. "Do you ever think about how strange it is? If that hospital hadn't turned us away, none of this would have happened." He nodded. "Sometimes the worst moments lead us to the best places." She took his hand. "Then maybe we were meant to find our way back like this." He squeezed her hand gently. "Maybe we were." The rain stopped, leaving the city bathed in moonlight. Art stepped out onto the balcony once more, breathing in the cool night air. He looked up at the stars and whispered quietly, to fate, to time, to the child who had brought him back to life. "I promise, my son. You'll never be alone again."